Ladies and gentlemen, students and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, listeners and learners. I, Dr. Rakesh from Univ.Saint, heartily cordially welcome all of you. It is really nice time, nice place, nice section that we are appreciating God's words daily, every day. It is the true aim of life to describe, to explain, to define. In all the holy religions of our holy land, it is said that we have the presence of God or Lord in the form of words. Our freedom fighters, free thinkers, mission starters, founders, those who came first in the world in the form of physical form, they started living in India. So, Indian Holy Land is really praiseworthy, admirable and appreciable for the worldly people. Friends, when we will analyze, observe and investigate that India's all holy religions have the common concept of nature. Naturality, spontaneity keeps us, makes us true. It is the form of life. Today, nowadays, on social media, we discuss online or live programs. These programs are the part of the truth. If they are directly displayed on the screen without any modification, fragmentation, without any change, without any fabrication. But today we record, download, save, imitate. All these technology are the part of secondary information technology. But the primary technology information, that is to be live, to be online, it is direct without bringing any change. Just by the ray of light, by the waves of sound, person, place or thing is observed, examined, investigated, diagnosed in the different sectors of agriculture, industry, means of transportation, means of communication, railways, post office, hospitals, airports, everywhere we imagine. So the great need is to be creative, generative and operative. Undoubtedly, our children, schools, students, youngsters, collegiates may take the help from the help books, but they are not to use them as it is. They are to bring change according to their own thought. So it is the way to be creative. India needs today creators, generators and operators. Our today's Prime Minister provokes, addresses, appeals and advocates that imagination is the best educational technology. If we imagine, we can bring revolution. It is the imagination. Thereby, the whole world came in form. The whole world's existence we see, it is due to imagination. According to Plato, Platonic theory is in that we see in the form of people, person, place, thing, whatsoever we see around us, that is in the form of the ideas. This idea came first in the mind of the creator, generator, operator and developer. What was, imagine what was at that time when there was nothing in the world. At that time there was ray of light and wave of sound. That our great man says, as per the saying of our holy scriptures of this holy land, it is said that is written in the chapter of the Genesis, there was light in the world. Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj, starter of the Sikhism and dark age, because that time was the time of dark age and Guruji came at that time in the form of light in the dark. So our history is influenced by such starters. Of this earth that God created in the form of light, then that ray of light we read in the different religions, life came in the world in the physical bodies of the 84 lakh species, in the living beings, in the form of water according to science. Some says it happens by air, some say it happens by fire, some says it happens by soil, and some say it happens by sky. So there are different theories that we read in the holy books, in the holy scriptures of this holy land. Our forefathers, our foretellers, forecasters, those who came first in this nature, but there was life by the blessing of God or grace of Lord. Undoubtedly, it can be said that Word is the form of God. But initially, when there was nothing in the world, at that time, Word was exist in the form of light. Dear friends, it's the way of research. It's the title or topic of the research for our scholars, university collegiates, university scholars, collegiates, those who are busy in searching and researching, in knowing the unknown facts, in knowing the unimaginative things of the world. But first, it is very necessary to know the Indian spiritualism, whether India is a developing country, but India's spiritualism is developed since time immemorial. India respects Indian holy motherland, respected, thanks, welcomed all outsiders, foreigners, because of its holy nature. So, imagination will make our youngsters nationalistic and patriotistic. If they imagine the time that our forefathers, our foretellers, free thinkers, freedom fighters provided us in the form of spiritual freedom, then why we are not free to think, to speak, to read, to write, to listen the truth? It is because of materialism. It's the fault of materialism, not of any external governing bodies. Why we have circled and covered by the false attraction of the world, by the falsification, by the sensual pleasure, enjoyment of this sensual pleasure is not the true aim of life. It is said by our all holy fathers, holy spiritual fathers explained it clearly that, O man, your true objective is not to spend your valuable breath in collecting mortal perishable goods, because one day a man is to repent. Dear friends, we can imagine the thought of a child who come on the earth with a great treasure of knowledge, information in the form of valuable thoughts. But as he spent his time with surroundings, with his near and dear ones, he becomes egoist and he forgets his past. So, it is rightly said by our holy starters of the different missions, a child is the father of man. Swami Vivekananda explained it. Return to the Vedas. My brothers and sisters of the America, unrelenting, unceasing and unstopping efforts are required until you don't get your ultimate object of life. One man, one word, one thought can bring the change in all. It is our ancestral, traditional or conventional theory of our all holy religions of our holy land that was explained by Swami Vivekananda, and he addressed, concentrated upon the purity of soul, sanctity of our relations. This was portrayed and depicted in that holy religious conference when Swamiji was addressing. Impact of language on education, a great deal of debate, policy action and conflict. The use of uniform languages can lower the cost of communication, facilitate education and expand economic growth. This lesson is quickly learned by new immigrants whose academic and economic success depends critically on mastering the lingua francas of their new home. At the same time, Attempts to impose official languages can meet considerable resistance, both because language is an important content or component of identity, and because learning a new language is difficult. This article examines education. That is, when students are taught in a language, usually an official state language that differs from the mother tongue, especially I ask if language mismatch benefits or hinders long-term educational achievement. Second, if language mismatch hinders long-term educational achievement, does fixing this mismatch by changing the medium of instruction to align with students' mother tongue lead to catch up in educational achievement? The language used in schools is the same as the learner's mother tongue, then educational achievement is greater, as residents are more likely to enroll, understand instruction, and complete different levels of schooling. For instance, Holly Blackley and Amy Chin, reference Blackley and Amy 2004, find that childhood immigrants to the United States from English-speaking countries report significantly greater educational achievement compared to those from non-English backgrounds. Language fluency might also be key for unlocking future economic declined by half when Morocco switched from French to Arabic as the medium of instruction in schools. Primarily because most organized economies and Levy reference English and Victor 1997, footnote 2 David Clinging Myth reference Clinging Myths 2014 argues that economic growth in sectors where communication is relatively important increases the incentive to learn new languages. Consequently, growth of the manufacturing sector increased bilingualism in mid-century India, especially among minority language speakers. Language mismatch might also influence education through the provision of public schools, although the direction of this effect is not clear. If speakers of the majority language control public spending, they might construct more schools in the areas where the language is spoken because of political patronage or shared preferences, leading to higher educational achievement. Conversely, school construction and spending on educational infrastructure might be directed at economically weaker regions. If minority language regions are also economically weaker, then these areas would experience greater improvements in education achievement. Footnote 3. Finally, language mismatch might be associated with greater migration if individuals who do not speak the official language of a region relocate to a different region seeking education or economic opportunities in their own language. The main contribution of this article is to examine the effect of language mismatch on educational achievement using large-scale historical events in India. Primary schooling in India is largely in the official language of a state or province. Both in the colonial period before 1947 as well as in the modern era, colonial era provinces, especially in South India, were formed without regard to language, which resulted in some areas where schools taught in the same language as the mother tongue of the majority of students and other areas where they did not. If the cost of completing formal education is low when instructed in one's mother tongue, then I expect long-term educational attainment to be lower in districts that have a different majority language from the official language. This illustrates the degree to which variation in language explains persistent underachievement in education within countries. In the immediate post-independence era, the 1956 recognition of South Indian states on strict linguistic lines aligned the majority language of districts with the official language of states, so that almost all children were taught in their mother tongue. As a result, a convergence in education levels between the previously aligned and misaligned districts help us to understand whether fixing language policies through political recognition can address persistent educational shortfalls. India is a particularly appropriate setting for studying the impact of language, since more than 1,600 languages are used in the country, with 22 languages claiming both wide speakership as well as constitutional recognition. Registrar General Reference General 2001. The boundaries of modern Indian states correspond to the areas where these languages are used. Public schools offer instructions using the medium of the state language, and regulators, the judiciary and other arms of state governments, use the state language for official correspondence with citizens. Thus, the setting permits comparison between multiple sets of major vernacular languages, each with tens of millions of speakers. As a result, the article circumvents the comparison of a colonial language, especially English with a vernacular language, which is troublesome, both because then the returns from globalization cannot be associated from pure language effects, and because population who speak these languages are often systematically different. There are two major empirical challenges in generating reliable estimates of the relationship between language mismatch and education. The primary challenge is that bivalent comparisons between communities that either speak or do not speak the official language might not yield unbiased estimates of the relationship between language mismatch and education because of at least two potential sources of endogeneity. First, individuals who do not speak the official language may move to ethnic enclaves where they do not need to learn a new language. Second, communities that recognize the link between speaking a different language and poorer economic outcomes may from their own political units. For example, linguistic minorities in countries such as Spain, Canada, and Cameroon launched separatist movements based on language. Thus, unbiased estimate require exogenous matching between languages and communities. The pattern of British conquest and province formation in the 18th century helps generate such estimates. Provincial boundaries. Provincial boundaries in British India were determined either by the sequence of British military conquest, with provinces covered together from various districts as imperial rule extended from the coast into the hinterland, or when the British or native rulers in Paris. I argue that this process was largely exogenous to linguistic concerns, leading to the inclusion of some districts in provinces where the district's numerically dominant mother tongue language was the same as the official language of the province, henceforth a majority district, and other districts in provinces where it was not a minority district. If mother tongue instruction facilitates schooling, and then historically majority districts should have had better educational outcomes compared to historically minority districts, insofar that educational achievement persists over generations. Minority districts could experience poorer education outcomes even up to the modern times, indicating the persistent effects of language mismatch. In 1955, the State Recognition Commission recommended forming new states strictly on linguistic lines. A principle which the central government followed while a principle which the central government follow while redrawing state boundaries in 1956, 60, 66 and 71. Government of India 1955. After recognition, new state boundaries consisted of those districts where the major language was the same as the official language of the state. A policy change in all the new states was extending the official language as the medium of instruction in schools and for all state-owned business. Thus, a natural experiment is set up where each district was classified as either majority or minority before the organization by historical accident and reassigned as majority after the recognition. I expect that growth rates for each of the measures for educational achievement should be higher in historically minority districts after recognition. As after integrating into co-linguistics, the second major empirical challenge is separating the impact of language mismatch from other characteristics of ethnicity and culture that are correlated with language. I account for those differences using three strategies. I examine the historical record which suggests that the social and cultural characteristics of the regions they were conquering. There is no evidence from nearly 50 years later. In addition, I try to account for the most obvious sources of differences between minority and majority. Minority and majority districts controlling for a number of geographical and social characteristics as well as state fixed effects in the regulations. The model explains a large part of the variation in the outcome variables, which as uses concerns associated with potentially omitted variables. Finally, the empirical strategy relies on multiple logically orthogonal tests that provide consistent evidence that mismatched language is the basis of worse educational outcomes. Using a district level panel data set based on the census of India, I find that shared language potentially lowers communication cost and increases educational achievements rates, and that language mismatch for minority districts is associated with lower rates of educational achievement. The impact is greater on primary and secondary schooling, which is conducted in the vernacular. Especially, the literacy rate in minority districts is estimated to be 18.0% lower than majority districts, and the middle school completion rate 25.2% lower. In contrast, although the fraction of college graduates in minority districts is 20, Historical background of English language. British conquest of India. Commencing in 1757, when the East India Company gained control over the provinces of Bengal, British colonial rule in India lasted 190 years. From 1757 to 1857, the British East India Company extended its control over the rest of India. The company's administration ended with the Mutiny of 1857, after which India was directly ruled as part of the British Empire. In South India, the company had obtained feudal control over the Coromandel coast from the Nawab of Carnatic in 1540. The geographically contiguous areas along the trading post of Fort St. George, later called Madras and now Chennai, from the Madras Presidency. In Western India, 7 islands acquired from Portugal as part of Royal Dowry in 1661 became the city of Bombay, now Mumbai. This and subsequent territorial acquisitions in Western India, notably the Maratha territories obtained in 1817 to 18, were integrated to form the Bombay Presidency. In addition to direct rule by the British government, a number of regions were indirectly ruled through the agency of native kings and princes. The major princely states in peninsular India were Hyderabad, Mysore and Travancore. Lakshmi year reference year 2010 shows that the British were selective about the regions annexed for direct rule. Footnote 7, therefore, a key concern for the empirical analysis in the subsequent sections is whether selection of regions administered directly was correlated with linguistic characteristics of those areas. The main events that shaped the boundaries of colonial South India were the Anglo-Mysore Wars 1767 to 1799 between Tipu Sultan of Mysore and the British allied with the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad. Mender Oak and Anand Swami, reference Oak and Anand 2012, describe the process of alliance formation and the pre-war commitments between the British and the Marathas and the Nizam on territorial division, arguing that the commitments were credible and non-subject to post-war negotiations. After Tipu's defeat in Third Anglo-Mysore War 1792, the Marathas regained Dharwad. The Gulbarg region was returned in the Nizam and the British added Malabar, Salam, Belray and Anandpur to the Madras Presidency would not state neither language nor social factors had a major role to play in determining colonial boundaries. Indeed, the report of Constitutional Reform Commission chaired by Secretary of State for India, Edwin Montaigne, and the Viceroy of India, Lord Chelmsford, describing the process of both conquest and organization of the administrative structure of colonial India, stated that the present map of British India was shaped by the military, political, or administrative agencies or conveniences of the moment, and with small regard to the natural affinities or wishes of the people. This sentiment was echoed 12 years later by the Simon Commission, Simon 1930, established to review the constitutional structure of British India. There were in India only a number of administrative areas, grown up almost haphazard as the result of conquest, supersession of former rulers, or administrative convenience. The Commission recommended reorganization of states to enable more coherent administration. Despite the Simon Commission's recommendations, the colonial government undertook no systematic recognition of administrative units before the end of British rule in India in 1947. The provincial boundaries of independent India in 1947 reflected geographical continuity in the pattern of British military conquest in the 18th and 19th centuries, with little consideration towards the cultural or social characteristics that united or divided the provinces. Education provision in colonial India. Education in India before 1757 followed indigenous system without standardization or significant state patronage and was restricted to the social and economic elites. Acharya reference Acharya 1978. At East India Company, officials focused on administration of conquered territories in the 18th century. They introduced formal education both to train potential employees for clerical positions as well as to create acceptance of Western traditions and colonial rule. Evans reference Evans 2002. A rich debate emerged on the language of instruction in government-aided schools between the Orientalists, who favored instruction in English, and the vernaculars who advocated instruction in local languages, inspired by Thomas Babington Macaulay's reference Macaulay and Sharp 1835, famous minute on Indian education. Governor General Lord William Bentinck decided to use English as a medium of instruction in mass education. However, instruction exclusively in English proved extensive with very few English language teachers or materials. Consequently, in 1854, Lord Dalhousie accepted Booth's recommendations outlined in the despatch which Radhakrishnan, reference Radhakrishnan 1948, called the Magna Carta of English Education in India, to adopt vernacular language for instruction in primary and secondary schools and use English for higher education. Univ.Saint reference Univ.Saint 1964, Evans reference Evans 2002. The British government established universities in Calcutta, Bombay and Madras Starting from 1857, Radhakrishna, reference Radhakrishna 1948, and the medium of instruction was English, Annamlai reference Annamlai, Tissue and Tollefson 2004. Growing demand for higher and professional education led to the establishment of the University of Allahabad in 1887, as well as 21 other universities in the 20th century, with the exception of Osmania University in Hyderabad, where undergraduate classes were taught in Urdu. The medium of instruction remained English. Radhakrishnan reference Radhakrishnan 1948. Teacher training prior to 1854. Formal teacher training was scarce. Footnote 10. Systematic teacher training was initiated in the vernacular in Bengal, Madras and Northwest provinces only after the dispatch of 1854. Nurullah and Naik reference Nurullah and Jain in 1951. In Bombay, no separate teacher training institutes were established. Instead, teacher training was conducted in the regular college of the Presidency for both Anglo vernacular and vernacular schools. By 1881-82, 9,314 teachers were employed in the Bombay Presidency and 553 undergoing training in Bombay. Candidates already possessed general education and were willing to undergo training for 3 years for better prospects. However, in Madras, candidates lacked education and were often unwilling to undergo long and rigorous training. Nonetheless, by 1881-82, 500 teachers were trained annually at 32 training schools in Madras. Following the report of the Indian Education Commission in 1882, Hunter reference Hunter, 1883, the provincial government accepted primary responsibility for teacher training. Consequently, teacher training facilities expanded considerably with 926 training institutes for men, with enrollment of 22,774 and 146 for women operating in British India by 1921. Of these, only 5 were private, unaided institutions, indicating the extent of government control of teacher training. After independence in 1947, the school system expanded considerably and teacher quality grew concurrently with greater numbers. The report of the second All India Educational Survey reports that 34.2% teachers had not completed matriculation, yet were employed in primary, middle and secondary schools. Of the remaining, 38.4% passed matriculation, while 15.9% had graduate or postgraduate qualifications. A significant fraction had other qualifications in music, craft or physical education. Recognition of Indian states. Although the Indian National Congress, the main nationalist party, endorsed the principle of the linguistic princes, India's independence, accompanied by partition on religious lines, dampens enthusiasm for further division on an ethnic or cultural basis. The death of an activist demanding a separate state for Telugu speakers, however, led to the formation of Andhra Pradesh from the Telugu speaking district of Hyderabad and Madras state, along with the formation of the states Reorganization Commission. This commission recommended redrawing state boundaries entirely on linguistic principles, explicitly recognizing the role of shared language in reducing transaction cost, stating that Indian states if linguistically constituted will be able to achieve internal cohesiveness because language is a vehicle for communication of thought, especially through vernacular education in schools, leading to increasing administrative link within the state because linguistic homogeneity as an important factor conducive to administrative convenience and efficiency. The modern states of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu were formed in 1956, Maharashtra and Gujarat in 1960, and Haryana, Himachal Pradesh and Nagaland in 1965 and 1970, and taught in the vernacular at the school level, using language data from the 1951 census. Table 1 shows that the Commission followed the linguistic majority rule for every district. Telugu was the most common mother tongue in all districts associated to Andhra Pradesh. Kannada in each district assigned to Karnataka, Malayalam in every district to Kerala, and Tamil in district to Tamil Nadu. This rules out both the possibility of bargaining or unobserved district statistics influencing the reorganization exercise. The only appendix contains details on changes to medium of instruction in government cooperative schools after states reorganization. Data description. The primary source of data is the Decadal Census of India conducted by the Ministry of Home Affairs of the Government of India. I use the 1951, 61, 71, 81 and 91 base of the census data at the district level from the last 4 waves has been compiled into a panel by V. Vanneman and Douglas, Barnes, reference Vanneman and Douglas 2000, and contains data on population characteristics such as literacy, educational achievement and source of livelihood. Each variable is reported separately for all persons, man, rural residents and rural male residents in the district. In addition, the 1981 and 91 census contain data on the number of schools and colleges at the district level. The Vanneman and Barnes reference Vanneman and Douglas 2000 data set is augmented with data on mother tongue, education, religion and caste composition from the 1951 census of India. This allows me to measure the baseline dates of educational achievement before 1956 and estimate the difference in outcomes as a result of the language change. The sources of the data are the economic tables and the district census handbooks, while the economic tables report population size variables for all 321 districts in 1951. The district census handbooks report a more detailed set of variables including educational achievement measures for 440 districts. The 1951 and 61 census asked respondents about their mother tongue, described in the census forms as the language first spoken by individual from the cradle. In addition, census forms in all waves defined literacy as the ability to read and write in any language. Since this definition